Welcome to Making Our Way Forward, a podcast where we share compelling life stories and learn from the experience of everyday entrepreneurs. At NACCE, we celebrate diversity and invite you to join the conversation as we talk to entrepreneurs and leaders from all walks of life. We hope that by telling their stories, we bring you inspiration, empower you to take action, and ignite entrepreneurship in your community.
Okay, so welcome to Making Our Way Forward. I'm so excited to be here with Craig Chavis Jr. He is an award-winning author, an interdisciplinary coach on a mission to actually help entrepreneurs. He's also a serial entrepreneur himself. He's done many things, such as being a part of the Peace Corps, and he is someone that I am so excited to talk to. So welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Natalia. Thanks, Dr. Corbin, for having me on this podcast. I'm super excited to be speaking with y'all today.
So, Craig, as I said, we here at Making Our Way Forward, we're actually thinking about the ways in which many people are seeking to make sense of who they are, where they're going, particularly in light of some of the things that's going on around us. So we turn on the news, we see things about COVID, we see what's happening in Afghanistan and Haiti. And so in light of what's going on, what has kept you motivated?
So when I work with clients, I always tell them, in order to begin, you must look within. And so what I mean by that statement is that you yourself should be motivating you to achieve whatever goals and targets that you have in life. And so for me, one of the things that keeps me going is my goal of becoming a better and higher version of myself. And it's not easy. It's very, very uncomfortable. But to me, is stagnation is an enemy of growth. And so if I'm constantly pushing myself and motivating myself to become a bigger and better version of myself, that's what keeps me motivating. Because if you're looking outside of yourself to find inspiration, you're going to lose inspiration very, very quickly. You must light your own creative fire and keep your own self going, and you'll never, ever stop.
Wow, that's amazing. So I know that you are a coach and you help entrepreneurs to actually discover their purpose. So with that said, I'd love to hear about how you're helping to kind of cultivate and facilitate this motivation for others at this time.
So one of the primary tools I give all my clients who are these aspiring entrepreneurs is this tool called the value creation framework. And so basically it's devised from three core elements. Number one, analyzing your skills. Number two, analyzing your passions. But then thirdly, most importantly, analyzing market demand. Because when you find a business where you're great at something and you love creating that thing, and then the market also demands and wants that, you're not only creating value for yourself, you're creating value for the market as well. Because one of my core philosophies is that money is only a byproduct of the value that you create for others. And so in business, you want to be doing something that you enjoy and that you are talented at doing. Because if you're producing a poor product, nobody's ever going to buy that. If you're very skilled, but you're lacking your passions, you're eventually going to burn out. But if you are combining your skills and your passions with market demand, you're going to, like I said, create value for yourself and create value for others. So that's why I say, in order to begin, you must look within. And that's going to strategically position you to build something of value that's going to stand the test of time.
Wow, thank you so much for that. One of the things that I've learned interviewing entrepreneurs and people who practice the entrepreneurial mindset is that oftentimes they have a story. And that story often inspires them and is a way that we come to understand how they have kind of begin to practice what they preach, if you will. So
Right.
I would love for you, if you would, to share with us just a part of your story in light of what has inspired and led you to do the work that you're doing, and also on your own kind of entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. Well, me being an award-winning author, let me take y'all on a little journey. So my name's Craig, and I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. And growing up, I moved around a lot because of my father's job. And one of the lessons that he taught me, he's like, if you run into a glass ceiling, or if you're running out of opportunities, sometimes you might have to uproot yourself, change your location, and create your own opportunities. And so that's what we did. We moved all across the state. And so the next place we moved was Cleveland. And growing up, I had a severe speech impediment. And after school, I had to do Hooked on Phonics to improve my speaking abilities. And my mother taught me, she's like, if you have a problem, you're going to have to be the one to solve your problem. You're going to have to work really hard. And so I did Hooked on Phonics every day from third grade to the eighth grade. And now today, I'm a public speaker and I speak multiple languages, but I never would have gotten that if I wouldn't have learned that lesson early on. But one of the things that really inspired me to get into entrepreneurship was my love of music. At 15, I became a teen DJ in Columbus, and I actually started my first LLC at 15 years old. And so I did that because though we didn't come from a lot of money, and so I used those proceeds to spend on buying my own car and just being a teen male like I was. But what kept me grounded, outside of music and business was athletics. I was good enough to get a football scholarship that took me down to Birmingham, Alabama. And that was my dream, was going to go to the NFL. But my sophomore year, suffered a career-ending injury and I almost dropped out. But my Spanish professor convinced me to study abroad in Costa Rica, and going to another country, changing my environment, creating this opportunity is what really inspired me to come back and focus on my entrepreneurial studies, and also envision that I could be an international businessman. So I got done with my 4-year degree, and I moved down to Florida, knocked out my MBA in less than a year. And when I was interviewing at some of these tech companies, I realized that I didn't want to sit in a cubicle for the rest of my life. I didn't want to manage, teams and just be in this office setting. I wanted to do something more fulfilling. And so right before I graduated, I ran into a Peace Corps recruiter who was like, you make the perfect Peace Corps volunteer. You're fluent in Spanish, you're entrepreneurial, you're creative. You should apply and see what happens. And so I applied for the Peace Corps, and that's what took me down to Peru for 2.5 years, where I was a community economic development facilitator, AKA a business coach, but I also taught youth entrepreneurship on the side. And when I was teaching youth entrepreneurship in these different colleges, one of my co-professors was a distiller. And after class, he taught me how to distill. And so I sold the liqueurs that we were making to a lot of the farmers and small business owners that I was coaching on the side. And this is what inspired me to move back to Peru by myself and open up one of the country's first branded craft distilleries. And it was a really successful venture. In less than 9 months, we got 4 products to market. We exported globally. But when I approached my landlord to sign the lease to extend my stay on the property, they confessed that they didn't own the business, didn't own the land. And so I was defrauded of my dream business. But what I realized is that that wasn't a failure. Like, to fail is just to experience a first attempt in learning. And so since that whole experience in 2017, I've gone on to manage a travel company in Costa Rica. I got into blockchain app development in Washington, D.C. And now I find myself as like this business coach and business strategist that specializes in helping entrepreneurs to overcome the fear of failure and start their business. So for me, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I have that real life experience of overcoming failure to start multiple businesses. And it's just something that doesn't feel like work to me. And I really enjoy what I do to this day.
That's amazing, Craig. I heard you say, mention in there about the youth entrepreneurship. And so we just recently interviewed a youth entrepreneur. It was a very interesting interview. So I would love, we're also focused on supporting student entrepreneurs as well. And so I would love to hear about your passion to support the youth entrepreneurs and some of the kind of visions and dreams you have around that particular goal?
Yeah, well, the reason why teaching youth entrepreneurship is so critical is that today the world is completely flat. It's not the way it used to be. We're in a very, very competitive job market. And so quickly things are changing. Well, the people who are most adaptive to change are people with an entrepreneurial mindset or an entrepreneurial disposition. Because the thing is that entrepreneurship really isn't just about creating a business. It's really about a way of thinking and about creating a life or a career that you have more control over. And guess what? Like if you work for somebody else, you can still be an entrepreneur. That's really being an intrapreneur. And so as long as you have this entrepreneurial disposition, you're going to be a very, very valuable entrepreneur working for yourself, or you could be a very, very valuable employee creating and innovating for other people at your current job. And so for me, I think introducing a lot of entrepreneurial curriculum to students starting in middle school, particular in high school especially, helps them to develop this entrepreneurial mindset that's going to position them for success in their careers in this ever-changing world.
Right. Thank you for that. I know that you were a Peace Corps volunteer, and you mentioned how entrepreneurship is not just about business creation per se, but it's about problem solving. And so I would love to ask you, what are some of the problems that you are interested in solving using that entrepreneurial mindset at this time?
So one of the things that's really important to me is equity. And that's kind of like flattening the playing field, because in entrepreneurship, or at least, in the community that I grew up in, we were never taught what an entrepreneur really was. We only associated entrepreneurship with somebody with particular being a white male or somebody who comes from a privileged background. And so if you don't have access to resources, if you don't have access to knowledge, if you don't have access to money, it's really, really difficult for you to pursue an entrepreneurial path. And so I remember growing up, one of my mentors told me, he's like, I have this formula for success. It's called the PI formula. The P stands for image, the P stands for performance, the I stands for image, and the E stands for exposure. And he's like, Craig, which variable do you think is the most impactful? And so for me, being an athlete, I'm like, it's performance. The people who work the hardest are the ones who succeed the most. But he's like, Craig, no, it's actually exposure. And so as I've matured and grown within my life and my career, I've realized that the people who have exposure to opportunities, who have exposure to money, who have exposure to resources, exposure to people, these are the people who are going to, succeed quicker. And so if we transform that same formula over to entrepreneurship, if we can, flatten the playing field and give everybody more equitable access to this knowledge, to this money, to these resources, this is going to change the game, because there's genius everywhere. There's people who are hardworking everywhere. But if you don't know certain things, you can't do certain things. And you do better when you know better. So equity is probably the number one thing that I'm hoping to pursue and achieve, with teaching entrepreneurship to the youth and to the masses.
Wow, that's beautiful. Equity is certainly a very important value for us at NACCE. I loved how you think about entrepreneurship, both as business creation, but also as ways to solve some of these comprehensive problems. With that said, I have also been able to take a look at some of your work through your book. So you've written a book called Burden of Dreams. So can you tell us about what inspired you to write that book, and a little bit about what that contains for us?
Yeah, so the story Burdens of a Dream is literally my memoir about leaving the US, joining the Peace Corps, starting a business, and recording the life and business lessons from those experiences. And like I said, I remember the day that I had to close my distillery, and I look back, and like I said, initially I felt like a failure. But I realized that, like I said, no, there is no failure. There's only feedback. And so when I moved back to Ohio in 2019 and I was sharing my story, I ran into a guy who was a publisher. And he's like, Craig, you have a book in you. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just an average guy, who had these experiences that were kind of extraordinary. But he's like, you need to share your story with the world. And so after I signed the book deal, like that project transmuted from just writing a book into a calling. And I wrote in the introduction that this book is dedicated to all those who will dare to abandon the status quo, follow the road not taken, and discover the person they're truly meant to become. And so to me, as much as I was writing those words to myself, I was writing those words to my readers as well. Because guess what? Every dream that you have has a price, has a cost associated with it. And if you're willing to bear the burden of your dream, if you're willing to pay a cost that other people aren't willing to pay, you're gonna live a life that most people can only dream of. So that's why it's entitled Burdens of a Dream. But furthermore, within the book, I also redefined entrepreneurship. I defined an entrepreneur as anyone who's willing to take a calculated risk to create something out of nothing and share it with the world. And as I introduced in the beginning of our conversation, most people only associate entrepreneurship with business. But like I said, it's really more about creating a life that you have more control and direction over. And so for me, writing that book and sharing my story with the world while also providing them with 33 actionable nuggets of wisdom, which are those life and business lessons, I was able to help people to avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made so that they can expedite their entrepreneurial journey. And since writing that book, my life has changed forever. And this is why I always lead with my personal story. And it's allowed me to create a better brand. It's allowed me to, meet so many amazing people. It's allowed me to build more authentic relationships. And it's just been the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Wow, that's amazing. I love hearing that. One of the quotes that I read of yours that really inspired me is the following, and I would love to kind of hear you expound on this a little bit. But you say that the creative entrepreneur accepts the possibility of failure and maximizes the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Some expectations may fall short of reality, and there's always a chance you may not accomplish your goals. Weigh your options, take calculated risk, and remember, decisions are what separates the doers from the dreamers. I want you to talk a little bit about the separation between the doers and the dreamers. If we find ourselves, which we love dreaming and that's amazing, but if we find ourselves in that space, how do we kind of transition over to become those doers as well?
One word: action. It's that simple, but it's not easy, because what prevents people from taking action is this 4-letter word called fear. And so what people say fear means is what? False evidence appearing real. And so like when I consult with so many aspiring entrepreneurs, they'll tell me, hey, I can't start a business because I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough knowledge, not enough resources, not enough support. But in all actuality, those reasons for not starting a business should fuel you and inspire you to take action. But it's like, and we've studied millions of entrepreneurs. I'm a case study. There's other people like me who have overcome all of those limiting beliefs to start our businesses. Why is that? Like, what is the difference between me starting a business and somebody who hasn't started a business? Well, it's the fact that I've overcome the fear of failure to leap out on faith, to take action, to see if this idea that I have in my mind, to see if this dream can become a reality. And so the difference between a dreamer and a doer is just taking action. And here's like a big secret that every entrepreneur knows and that most aspiring entrepreneurs don't know. And it's that you learn while doing, by doing. So the key there is that you're only going to figure out what your next best step is after you take your next best step. Like you literally have to walk on faith. And of course, you do this in a strategic way. You don't try to do everything by yourself. But the way that you become a doer is by putting in work and taking action. It's that simple, but it's not easy.
Right. Wow, my dad is a Southern Baptist preacher, and they oftentimes makes mention of this idea of being able to walk by faith, and so I love that you mentioned that, and also I've heard him say a number of times, that the message is to come and follow me. So it's an experiential kind of message. And so to your point, oftentimes it seems that it means to dive in and to grab it and to embrace it with your whole self. So I love that. One more quote that I really was inspired by. It says the creative entrepreneur checks their ego at the door and teams up with others to develop mutually beneficial relationships. Realize that nobody is truly self-made, and only narcissists believe they are successful exclusively based upon their merit. Avoid this trap. Humble yourself by working with like-minded people to accelerate your learning curve and increase productivity. In a world where particularly adults are made to feel that they should already know everything. How do you cultivate that type of humility and to continue to be a kind of lifelong learner up against that type of culture and rationale?
Well, I mean, that's a beautiful question to ask after the prior question, because we were talking about fear, right? Well, one of the things I've learned is that you have to do stuff while you're afraid. And so when you're doing stuff while you're afraid, it forces you to do things that you typically wouldn't do. But that fear, it humbles you because you realize that you don't know everything. And because people naturally don't want to experience failure, one of the best ways to avoid failure is to find people who have already accomplished that very thing that you want to accomplish. So that's why it's so important to be resourceful and to reach out and ask for help. Because why would you logically want to reinvent the wheel when you don't have to? If I know you, Jeff, or you, Natalia, have accomplished or have built a business that I want to build, naturally, it should be wise for me to ask for help. And who knows, that could help me to expedite my growth and help me to accomplish those goals much quicker than I would by myself. And so developing that humility, being resourceful, which I think is the number one attribute of a successful entrepreneur, it's just the strategic and the wise thing to do, because none of us are self-made. We all had help getting to where we are at in life. And why not, ask for help? I mean, closed mouths don't get fed. And so it's just a smart and wise thing to do in entrepreneurship is to ask for help.
Yeah, I hear you mentioned again fear. I was just thinking oftentimes the fear is like a fear of rejection. And so I would just, as a kind of continuation, can you expound a little bit on specifically how to overcome maybe a fear of rejection?
Well, here's the funny thing. If you don't do something, the answer is no. If you do something, the answer could be no. But the only way to convert a rejection into a yes is to do something. And so that's just the obvious mental game that I play. It's okay, if I don't do what I need to do, nothing's going to change. But the only way for something to change is for me to take an action and to try. And so if you don't try, you'll never get to where you want to go. But if you do try, there's a chance that, of course, you might not receive that yes, but by trying, you'll get to that yes eventually. So that's how you overcome failure, is just knowing that if you do something, then you can make whatever you want happen.
Greg, I would argue that we are in a time of great change. There are paradigm shifts. There are a lot of interesting opportunities in the form of problems that we see. So I believe we need entrepreneurs in every regard: social, civic, business entrepreneurs. So you say that becoming an entrepreneur is something that everyone can do. So I would ask you, what would you say to the reluctant entrepreneur at this time?
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, what is the cost of doing nothing? And that's a question that most people aren't asked, because in life, we've kind of been programmed to think that, hey, doing nothing is safety. Doing nothing is, not making a move is okay. But I think about chess, and it's like, in chess, the objective is to, checkmate, is to capture the king. Well, not moving is probably the worst thing that you could do, because if you're not moving, the rest of the world, the other pieces are consistently moving. And so, like, the cost of doing nothing is something that I'm not willing to bear. And so just realize that if you don't do anything, nothing will ever change. And so if you want to see the change in the world, you have to represent the change that you wish to see. So if you're a reluctant entrepreneur, just know that, like, you're the reason why things aren't moving forward. So for me, that's why the cost of doing nothing is something that I like to mention to people, because that's what really gets people to reframe and to rethink and to question, okay, I need to take some action, because it's really on me to be the change that I wish to see in the world.
Wow, if that doesn't give you a sense of urgency, I don't know what will. So, Craig, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. I think so many people are going to be able to benefit from what you have shared with us. It's been inspirational, it's been informative, and honestly, personally, it's been motivational. So thank you again so much for being on Making Our Way Forward.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Natalia, for having me on. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share my story and to offer some inspirational nuggets of wisdom that people can apply to further their entrepreneurial journey. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that listening to this podcast will help you to explore the many ways we might define entrepreneurship. Join us every other Wednesday for more episodes as we celebrate opportunity, learn from one another, and grow together. Subscribe to this podcast, connect with us on social media, and learn more about today's speakers at nacce.com/podcast. We look forward to making our way forward together with you.
Have you heard about our latest book, Impact Ed: How Community College Entrepreneurship Creates Equity and Prosperity? This is our roadmap for building back better in 50 states and globally. In each chapter, we share the inspiring stories of everyday entrepreneurs and explain how community colleges play a crucial role in their success. Visit us at nacce.com/impacted to order your copy now and join us in this work.